What started as something of a locked room mystery ended up turning into something truly inexplicable. How could a skeletal hand displayed in a glass box cause a man to confess to murder? Hello, I'm Ceridwen, and I've had a lifelong interest in all things spooky and weird. From ghosts and hauntings to UAPs, as a child I devoured books on all paranormal subjects. Now, older, hopefully wiser, and using the Carl Sagan standard, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, join me as I examine the stories that inform my childhood paranormal beliefs, case by case, all in the hope of finding the truth behind the tales. But before we get started, I have to acknowledge that my formative years of interest in the paranormal was shaped by a series of books. You may have heard of the Hamlin Book of Ghosts or Osborne's The World of the Unknown Ghosts, and they certainly did leave lasting impressions on me and some nightmares. But the world's greatest ghosts, the world's greatest UFO mysteries, alongside the world's greatest mysteries, were written as part of the, no surprises, World's Greatest series by Nigel, Blundell and Roger Boar, and these were books I read on repeat and I still have them to this day. Printed in the early 1980s, I received these books at the age of 10 in 1988, and I believed every word. Now, whilst it's not my intention to do a hit piece on the authors, I'll be going through as many of the stories in these books as possible, and there are many, to find out how the stories came about, how much is real, how much is fictionalised, and how much is there purely to entertain. In short, let's get some critical thinking hats on, decide if the extraordinary evidence meets the extraordinary claims, and see if the paranormal tales in the World's Greatest Book series are worth their salt. And if this is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, or you live for rational explanations and measured thinking, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos. We start off under the chapter Vengeful Ghosts and Curses, and this story, the inaugural offering in the World's Greatest Ghosts, is titled The Bloodstone Ring, and it has a cute subheading, Severed Hand Trapped a Killer. From the off, as you'd imagine, there are content warnings for this tale, and they include murder, discussion of human remains, blood and violence. The incident contained in this story is alleged to have occurred in Willisham, a tiny village near Ipswich, Suffolk in England. In 1873, an 18-year-old woman by the name of Mary Gray married a man called Basil Osborne. Before doing so, she wrote to her childhood boyfriend John Bodneys asking to be forgiven for getting married. We'll come back to that. After her wedding, Mary went to her bedroom for some me time. Thereafter, Osborne arrived to take her on their honeymoon. It does not say where that would have been to. But Mary had not emerged from the bedroom. The door was locked, and presumably there was no response to knocking on said door. So on forcing the door open, the room was found to be empty. An open window in the room led to a balcony and steps down to an enclosed garden wherein no Mary could be seen. So where was she? She had vanished, seemingly without a trace. Osborne, her poor new husband, then died not long after, with villagers attributing a broken heart as the cause. 18 years later, Mary's remains were discovered in the roots of an old oak tree, which had come down in a storm. Police Constable Klug, the sole enforcer of the law in the area, was overseeing the scene. Now, according to the book, on a hunch, Klug took a dismembered hand from the site to Mary's sister Ellen. Ellen recognised the bloodstone ring on one of the fingers because she herself had given the ring to Mary as a wedding gift. It's also explained Klug hadn't been there around the time of Mary's disappearance, but the event had been immortalised in ballad form, and this ballad was said to be popular, so it must have triggered his memory. Throughout the next 18 years, Ellen Gray kept the hand up until she died. In her will, she stipulated her housekeeper, Maggie Williams, would inherit her estate, but on the proviso Williams must display Mary Gray's hand in a public place where, and I quote, it may some day confront the murderer. Mary then opened the finest pub in Willisham, displaying the hand in a glass box on the wall. Some time passed, and now in 1895 people in the pub were keeping out of a storm and talking about the hand in the box because it was still there on display. A stranger in the group required an explanation of the hand, specifically about which oak tree it had been found under, and was thus told the story behind it. Allegedly, he began screaming after hearing the tale, and with blood dripping from his fingers, he was revealed to be John Bodney's, Mary's apparently missing former beau. Police Constable Klug arrived in due course, and Bodneys confessed to murdering Mary. He told Klug he was jealous and had gone to Mary's home and kidnapped her, though he didn't mean to kill her. He had taken her to the oak tree, but said she'd struggled so hard he'd inadvertently broken her neck, as you do. He'd buried her in a shallow grave under the oak and fled. He never knew peace thereafter and felt compelled to come back. Admittedly, this is 22 years later, so I don't know how strong that compulsion really was. He was promptly popped into a jail cell to wait for trial, but died of no known disease. The villagers who had been present in the pub maintained their story, however, and buried Mary's hand with the rest of her skeleton, then burned the shirt smeared by Bodney's bloody fingers, seemingly on the anniversary of the day he was confronted with the evidence of his crime. I don't know whose shirt it was, however, the book doesn't say was it Bodney's own or someone else in the pub, it's just not clear. And that's the story. And as it turns out, there's not much clarity elsewhere either. There are literally no good references for this one that I can find. Everything seems to come from Facebook, which is not a source I can or will ever rely on, especially since they just seem to be repeating the story as found in the book. I can't even find any of the named characters in the civil register for the years mentioned or tied to the location. Similarly, I can't find records of a will for Ellen Gray. As for some specific points here, I'm also not sure I know why Mary would bother writing to Bodneys to ask forgiveness for getting married. I mean, to paraphrase the great Beyonce, if he liked her, he should have put a ring on it. Just a personal sort of dislike about this story. Further, how Bodneys escaped with a kidnapped Mary isn't actually explained. It was ostensibly a locked room mystery setup, and the garden just outside it's said to be enclosed, and I take that to mean that there are no other ways out of the garden. So either there is a way the authors did not deign to mention, such as Bodneys and Mary simply just left unobserved through a rather ordinary door elsewhere in the building. For example, let's say they exited the bedroom, went into the garden, opened a door to another room in the house from the garden, walked through the house, went outside again by a different door, and no one saw them the entire time. Entirely plausible, by the way, and more likely. Or do the authors allude to the disappearance as some kind of paranormal occurrence? Frankly, it just seems pointless to mention it and not to come back to it. Moving on. There isn't a pub in Willisham today, from what I can tell, thank you Google Earth, let alone any others for it to compete with to be the finest. However, the nearby Lime Burners in Ofton, a tiny stone's throw away from Willisham, was founded around 1850. According to the pub's website, John Hood, who is listed as a lime burner and beer housekeeper in 1844 and the 1855 editions of White's Directory, is believed to be the individual who founded the pub, and in said directory, Hood is listed under Willisham Parish. It could therefore be a candidate for the pub in question in our tale, but the pub is not named and it's impossible to tell which building it would have been. And there's nothing about Maggie, the pub's original landlady. More holes in the story can be found in its other claims too. If the policeman Klug took Mary's disembodied hand from her impromptu gravesite on a hunch or a whim because he was aware of her story from a popular ballad, can we find the ballad in question? Well, yes, but not really. There is a ballad about a Mary Gray and Bessie or Betsy Bell, and that's not Bell Witch Betsy. I'll cover the Bell Witch at some point in the future, however. Mary Gray and Bessie Bell were plague victims in the late 17th century, and this ballad would have been known at the time. Bessie Bell and Mary Gray is said to have been written around the end of the 17th century, but was definitely well known in the 19th century, so maybe this is the ballad alluded to. This song is still popular today and, perhaps pertinent for this iteration of the story, it was recorded by Maddie Pryor and Martin Carthy of Steel Eye Span on Carthy's 1972 album Shearwater, and Lalla Norma Waterston of the Watersons folk group recorded a version later in 1977. The World's Greatest Ghost was first published in 1983, so I am guessing maybe this song was something the authors had heard or knew of in passing, but perhaps weren't entirely au fait with its subject matter. And if I'm generous, I could imagine there to be local ballads about Wilsham's Mary, but if there was, there's no record I can find. I even did a Google search and its AI hallucinated a whole lyric for this imaginary ballad, wherein it decided Mary Gray was the younger sister of Lady Jane Grey, England's 9 Days Queen. And this is why I'd never take an AI answer as fact without double checking a reliable source. It's just a public service announcement right there. Regarding Bodney's dying in his jail cell before trial, the average age of death in 1895 in the United Kingdom was just shy of 46 years old. So if Bodney's was a real person, it could have just been his time. And it was said that he had had a ravaged face, so who knows? Also could have been murdered too, wouldn't be surprised. Authorities in the tale certainly didn't believe the bit about him bleeding, and neither should anyone else, because this isn't how this myth is supposed to go. I believe this is meant to be a link to cruentation, which, according to superstitious and religious medieval beliefs, is a macabre response from corpses which were said to bleed in the presence of their murderers. People were sentenced from this evidence, but note that it's the corpse, the dead, who are supposed to be doing the bleeding, not the murderers. Of course, a small village could have its own spin on the myth, but I don't find this being a thing elsewhere, and even the original version of the myth is just that, myth, not fact. Bloods or fluids leaking from a dead body can happen if the body is jostled, moved around, such as when it is presented as evidence, or if there is, for example, a cut on the body. Regardless, the blood, mythologically or otherwise, shouldn't have been coming from John Bodney's, so I'm wondering how he ended up making a mess. Maybe he dug his nails in his fingertips because he was so on edge? I suspect it's just bobbins. Anywho, if you want more in-depth information about rather real cruentation, Dr. Julia Martins has an awesome video on the subject which I've linked in the description and is well worth your time. And now back to the bloodstone ring itself. Bloodstone is chalcedony, a cryptocrystalline quartz. It's dark green with red jasper flecks, and it's often referred to as blood jasper or heliotrope. It's a birthstone for March, is supposed to promote health and even heal and stop bleeding. Quite ironic in this case. In religion, it's said the specks are the blood of Jesus Christ, and I suspect, in addition to the misapplied cruentation angle, the authors were trying a subtle appeal to religious beliefs here. The World's Greatest Ghost claimed Ellen gave Mary the ring as a wedding gift because Mary was born in March, and Bloodstone, as we said, is one of the birthstones for that month. I just find it a little odd to give what seems like more of a birthday present as a wedding gift, but maybe they did that back in the day, and that's just my take on it. In closing, the worst thing about this story, the first in a book about ghosts, is there are no ghosts. The chapter it sits in is called Vengeful Ghosts and Curses, but there's no ghost. And there's not even a curse that's actually a proper curse, if you can call it a curse in the first place. This is like filler content, and it's at the start of the book, and I am disappointed. Oh well, let's pretend it didn't happen and we can move on to the next instalment in The World's Greatest Ghost. So, what do you think really happened here? If it's even real at all? How did Bodney's and the kidnapped Mary escape her locked room? I really would love to hear people's thoughts on that one. Comment below and let's discuss. Thanks so much for watching, especially if you stuck with me to the end. I'd really love it if you gave the video a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you're not already, comment below and hit the notification bell, and that way you'll not miss the next video with another spooky story investigation, and I'll see you next time.